Jake Morrison looked out the small window of the transport ship. The stars looked different here, far from Earth. Below him, a huge space station slowly turned around a blue moon. The Galactic Survival Institute looked like a giant crystal flower, floating in space. First time seeing it? Asked the pilot, a short alien with 4 arms and blue skin. Yeah, Jake said. It's bigger than I thought it would be. The pilot made a sound that might have been a laugh. Wait until you see inside. They have training rooms that can make any world you can think of. Jake nodded and picked up his bag. Inside were his few belongings and his old military gear. He wondered if any of it would be useful here. The letter from the Institute had said to bring personal items, but it also said most Earth equipment would not work with their systems. The docking bay was huge and filled with beings Jake had never seen before. Some looked like walking trees. Others were made of what looked like living metal. A few floated in the air without any visible means of support. Jake felt very ordinary in comparison. Human Jake Morrison? A voice spoke behind him. Jake turned to see a tall, thin being that looked like it was made of purple crystal. Light seemed to move through its body when it spoke. Yes, that's me. I am Dr. Zilthara, your orientation instructor. Please follow me. They walked through long halls, filled with more strange beings. Jake noticed that many of them stopped to stare at him. Some pointed and whispered to each other. He was used to being looked at 6 feet tall with broad shoulders. He stood out even among humans, but this felt different. Are humans that unusual here? Jake asked. Dr. Zulthara's crystal body flickered. You are our first student from what we call a Class 12 Death World. Most of our students come from much safer planets. Death World? A planet where the environment is so dangerous that most species could not survive there. Earth received the highest danger rating we have ever given. Jake stopped walking. Wait, Earth is dangerous? Extremely dangerous. Your planet has weather that kills, animals that hunt in packs, plants that produce deadly toxins, and gravity levels that would crush most of my students. The Academic Council is still debating whether you should be allowed to stay. They entered a large room filled with seats arranged in a circle. About 20 beings sat in various chairs, pods, and floating platforms. All of them turned to look at Jake when he entered. Class, this is Jake Morrison from Earth, Dr. Zilthara announced. He will be joining us for basic environmental hazard recognition. A being that looked like a large insect raised one of its 6 arms. Professor, is it safe to have him here? My Homeworld Safety Council sent a warning about Deathworld species. I assure you, Kevtar, that Jake has passed all our medical and psychological tests. He is no more dangerous than any other student. Jake took an empty seat next to a being that looked like it was made of flowing water. It moved its chair slightly away from him. Now then, Dr. Zilthara continued, today, we will be reviewing the basic principles of survival in hostile environments. Who can tell me the 3 most important rules? Several students raised hands, arms, or tentacles. Dr. Zilthara pointed to one that looked like a floating jellyfish. Always avoid unnecessary risks, use technology to create safe spaces, and retreat when faced with superior threats. Excellent, UNL. These principles have kept galactic explorers alive for thousands of years. Dr. Zilthara activated a holographic display. Let us examine a Class 7 world, moderately dangerous by our standards. The display showed a jungle scene with tall trees, thick vines, and strange animals moving through the undergrowth. Jake could hear several students make worried sounds. Notice the dense vegetation that limits visibility, Dr. Zilthara explained. The proper response is to clear a safe landing zone with energy weapons, establish a protected perimeter, and remain within that zone until extraction. Jake raised his hand. What about exploring the area? Exploration would only be attempted with full protective suits and armed escort teams. This environment presents too many unknown variables for individual survival. Jake looked at the display. Again, the jungle looked like some places he had camped in back home. It doesn't look that bad. The room went very quiet. Several students moved further away from Jake. I'm sorry, Dr. Zilthara said. Did you say it doesn't look bad? Well, yeah. I mean, you've got fresh water running through it. I can see the stream. Those fruit trees look safe to eat from. The animal tracks show there are small game animals. Around, the soil looks rich enough to grow food if you needed to. It actually looks like a pretty nice place to set up camp. Dr. Zilthara's crystal body went completely dark for a moment. You would consider camping in this environment? Sure, I've camped in worse places for fun. Kevtar, the insect being, made a high-pitched sound of distress. For fun? You voluntarily expose yourself to danger for recreation. It's not really dangerous if you know what you're doing. You just need to pay attention to your surroundings and use common sense. Dr. Zilthara changed the display to show a different scene, a rocky desert with high winds and temperature readings that shifted from very hot to very cold. This is a Class 9 world. Notice the extreme temperature variations and hostile weather patterns. How would you approach this environment, Jake? Jake studied the display. Well, those rock formations would provide natural windbreaks and shelter. The temperature swings mean there's probably water condensation at night that you could collect. Those dark areas in the rocks might be caves. And see how the sand is blown in patterns? That tells you about the regular wind directions, so you'd know where to set up camp to avoid the worst of it. You would attempt to survive on this world? It would be challenging, but doable. My hometown gets temperature swings of about 60 degrees Celsius between summer and winter. I've been camping in weather like this. Dr. Zilthara's body flickered rapidly. Your hometown experiences temperature variations of 60 degrees? Well, yeah, as in everyone's. The room erupted in. Sounds of distress from various species. The water being next to Jake actually moved to a different seat entirely. Jake, Dr. Zilthara said carefully, most of our students come from worlds where the temperature varies by less than 10 degrees throughout the entire year. A 30-degree variation is considered extreme. Oh, Jake looked around the room at all the staring faces. So when you say Earth is a death world, ... we mean that your normal living conditions would kill most of the beings in this room within hours. Jake thought about this. But if that's true, then why am I here? What could I possibly learn from a survival course if I already live in worse conditions than anything you're going to show me? Dr. Zilthara was quiet for a long moment. That, she said finally, is an excellent question. Class dismissed. As the other students quickly filed out, Jake heard them whispering to each other in various languages. He caught words like insane, dangerous, and impossible. Dr. Zilthara approached him as he gathered his things. Jake, I need to ask you something. When you look at those environments we showed today, do you see danger? I see challenges, Jake said. Problems that need solutions. Why? Because every other species in the galaxy sees certain death. I think we may need to reconsider our entire approach to survival training. Jake slung his bag over his shoulder. Doc, where I come from, we have a saying. It's not about surviving the environment. It's about making the environment work for you. Dr. Zilthara's crystal body pulsed with bright light. I think you're going to change everything. Word spread quickly through the Galactic Survival Institute. Within 2 days, Jake found himself the center of attention wherever he went. Some students stared at him with fear. Others seemed curious. A few followed him at a distance, whispering to each other. Jake was eating lunch in the cafeteria when a floating being approached his table. It looked like a small cloud with eyes. "Excuse me," it said in a voice like wind chimes. "I am Nixara. I study peaceful conflict resolution. May I ask you something?" "Sure," Shake said, putting down his sandwich. "Is it true that your species fights each other for sport?" Jake almost choked on his drink. "What?" "No, we don't fight for sport. Well, not really. We have sports that involve fighting, but they have rules and safety equipment. But you do engage. In combat voluntarily? Some people do boxing or martial arts, yeah. But it's not like we're trying to hurt each other. It's more about skill and fitness." Nixara drifted back slightly. "On my world, any form of conflict is avoided. We believe violence only leads to more violence." "That's probably smart," Jake said. "But sometimes you need to be able to defend yourself." "Defend against what?" "We have removed all dangerous elements from our environment." "What if something dangerous comes to your environment?" Nixara was quiet for a moment. "We have never considered that possibility." Dr. Zilthara appeared at their table. "Jake, I need to speak with you. The administration wants to conduct a study." Jake followed her to a smaller room where several beings waited. One was a tall reptilian creature with scales that shifted color. Another looked like a walking tree. A third was clearly human, the first Jake had seen since arriving. "Jake, this is Dr. Mel Voren, our xenobiologist," Dr. Zilthara said, pointing to the reptilian being. "Professor Grudel from the engineering department," she indicated the tree-like being, "and Captain Steve Parker from your own species." "Good to meet another human," Steve said, shaking Jake's hand. "I'm here as an observer from the Colonial Defense Force. We want to understand your survival methods," Dr. Melvorin said. His scales shifted to a pale green. "Your approach seems to contradict everything we know about staying alive in hostile environments." "I'm not sure what you mean," Jake said. "Yesterday, you looked at environments that would terrify most species and saw opportunities. This goes against all accepted survival science." Professor Grudel rustled his leaves. "We have studied survival for thousands of years. The safest approach is always to avoid danger, use technology for protection, and retreat when threatened." "Those are good ideas," Jake agreed. "But sometimes you can't avoid danger. Sometimes you have to work with what you have." "Can you give us an example?" Dr. Melvorin asked. Jake thought for a moment. "Okay, let's say you're on a planet, and your ship crashes. Your communication equipment is broken, your food supplies are limited, and you don't know when rescue will come. What do you do?" "Activate the emergency beacon, ration food supplies, and wait for rescue," Professor Grudel said immediately. "That's smart," Jake said. "But what if the beacon is also broken? What if rescue doesn't come? Then you attempt to repair the beacon, using available technology." "Good, but what if you can't repair it?" The room went quiet. Finally, Dr. Melvorin spoke. "Then you would likely die. Or," Jake said, "you could learn to live on the planet. Live on an unknown world? That would be impossible." "Why impossible? People live on worlds. You just need to figure out how." Captain Parker leaned forward. "Jake, these people don't think like we do. They see problems where we see puzzles." "What do you mean?" "Show them," Steve said. "Dr. Zilthara, can you set up a simulation?" Dr. Zilthara activated a holographic display. "Computer, create a basic survival scenario. Crashed ship, limited supplies, unknown world." The display showed a rocky landscape with strange plants and an orange sky. In the center was a damaged spaceship. "Standard protocol," Professor Grudel said, "is to remain with the ship, signal for help, and conserve resources." "That's a good start," Jake said. But I'd also want to know what's around me. He walked up to the display. See those plants? The different colors mean different things. Green usually means safe. Red or purple might mean poisonous. But you'd test them carefully. Test them? That could be fatal. Not if you're careful. You touch a small piece to your skin first. If nothing happens, you touch it to your lip. If that's okay, you put a tiny bit on your tongue. You go slowly. Dr. Melvoran's scales turned bright yellow. You would risk poisoning yourself? I'd risk a small amount of poison to avoid starving. But look at the rest of the area. See how the rocks are arranged? That suggests water flow. There's probably a stream or river nearby. Jake pointed to different parts of the display. Those dark patches in the rocks look like caves. Good for shelter. The way the soil is distributed suggests which direction the weather comes from. And see those small paths? Those are animal tracks. Animals need water and food, so following them would lead to both. But what if the animals are dangerous? Nixara asked. She had followed them to the room. Then you'd be careful around them. But animals can also tell you a lot about an environment. If they're eating something, it's probably safe to eat. If they're avoiding an area, there's probably a good reason. This is fascinating, Dr. Melvoran said. You're treating the environment like a source of information. Everything tells you something, Jake said. The color of the sky, the way the wind blows, the sounds you hear. You just need to pay attention. Dr. Zilthara changed the display to show the same area at night. What about when conditions change? Night is different, but it's not necessarily worse. Some things are easier at night. You can see fires from farther away, so you know where other people might be. The temperature drops, so you know where warm spots are. And some animals are only active at night, so you learn different things. You find opportunities in every situation, Dr. Melvoran observed. I try to. There's usually something useful in any situation if you look for it. Captain Parker smiled. Jake, you're giving these people an entirely new way to think about survival. I'm just thinking logically. That's the point, Dr. Zilthara said. Your logic is different from ours. We think about how to avoid problems. You think about how to solve them. Both are good, Jake said. But you can't always avoid problems. Professor Grudel S. Leaves rustled loudly. This could change everything we teach? It should, Dr. Melvoran said. We've been teaching fear when we should be teaching adaptation. Over the next few days, Jake found himself working with small groups of students. Dr. Zilthara wanted to see if his methods could be taught to other species. The first group was nervous. Kevtar, the insect being, wouldn't come within 10 feet of Jake. UNL, the water being, kept asking about safety protocols. Today, we're going to practice observation, Jake told them. We're going to look at a simple environment and see what we can learn from it. The holographic display showed a forest clearing with a small stream running through it. What do you see? Jake asked. Trees, Kevtar said from across the room. Water, UNL added. Good. What else? Grass, said another. Student. Rocks, said a fourth. Okay, now let's look deeper. Why are the trees taller on one side of the stream? The students looked confused. Because that side gets more sunlight, Jake explained. The stream runs north to south, so the east side gets morning sun and the west side gets afternoon sun. The taller trees are on the side that gets more total sunlight. How does that help us survive? Kevtar asked. It tells you which direction is which, even if you don't have a compass. It also tells you that the west side of the stream is probably warmer in the evening, so that's where you'd want to set up camp. You can determine direction from trees, UNL asked. From lots of things. Moss usually grows on the north side of trees. Snow melts faster on south-facing slopes. There are dozens of natural signs that tell you which way is which. By the end of the session, the students were starting to ask different questions. Instead of, is it safe? They were asking, what does this tell us? Dr. Zilthara observed from the back of the room. After the students left, she approached Jake. In 3 hours, you've changed how they think about their environment. They're smart, Jake said. They just needed to look at things differently. Jake, I need to ask you something. Are all humans like you? What do you mean? Are all humans able to see opportunities where others see only danger? Jake thought about it. I guess so. I mean, we've had to be. Earth doesn't give us a choice. That's what I thought. Dr. Zilthara's crystal body pulsed with soft light. I think we're going to need to rewrite our entire curriculum. 3 weeks after Jake's arrival, the Institute's board called an emergency meeting. Jake found himself sitting in a large chamber facing 12 beings of different species. Their expressions ranged from curious to worried to openly hostile. Jake. Morrison, said the being in the center, a tall figure made of what looked like living metal. I am Director Voxran. We have been watching your progress with great interest. Thank you, sir. Some of our faculty believe your methods could revolutionize survival training. Others believe they are dangerous and should be banned. We need to settle this matter. Jake shifted in his seat. What do you want me to do? We want you to prove your methods work. We're going to send you to a real world with real dangers. You'll have volunteers from 6 different species with you. 30 days, minimal equipment, no communication with the outside world. That sounds fair. Dr. Zilthara, who was sitting to the side, spoke up. Jake, this is not a simulation. This is Survey Planet 7 Alpha. It's classified as moderately hazardous, but it has killed 3 previous survey teams. What happened to them? They followed standard protocol. They established safe zones, rationed their supplies, and waited for rescue. But the planet's weather patterns made extraction impossible. They died waiting. Director Voxran continued. If you succeed, we will consider integrating your methods into our curriculum. If you fail, we will ask your species to leave the Institute. I understand, Jake said. Who are the volunteers? 6 students who have been working with you. They volunteered despite the risks. Jake was surprised. They want to come? They believe in your methods more than our faculty does. 2 days later, Jake found himself on a transport ship with his 6 volunteers. Kevtar, the insect being, was still nervous but determined. UNL, the water being, had somehow figured out how to carry extra water in her body. Nixara, the cloud being, floated anxiously around the ship. There were 3 others. Zephic, who looked like a walking crystal that gave off light. Velther, who was actually 5 small beings that worked together as one mind. And Grixon, a mechanical being that clicked and whirred when it moved. Are you scared? Kevtar asked Jake as they prepared to land. A little, Jake admitted. Being scared keeps you alert. But I'm more excited than scared. Excited? Zephic's light pulsed brighter. We are going to a world that has killed others. We're going to a world that killed people who use different methods than we do, Jake corrected. We're going to do things differently. The planet was harsh. The sky was a strange purple color, and the air smelled of sulfur. The temperature was cold enough to see their breath, but Jake knew from the briefing that it would be blazing hot in just a few hours. First thing, Jake said as they stood by their landed shuttle, we need to understand this place. What do you? See? Rocks, Kevtar said. Wind, Nixara added. Strange plants, UNL observed. Good. Now let's look closer. See how the rocks are arranged? That tells us about the wind patterns. The plants are growing in specific spots. That tells us about water and soil conditions. Jake walked around the landing area, pointing out details. The ground here is different colors. The dark patches hold heat longer. The light patches reflect heat. When it gets hot later, we'll want to be in the light areas. How do you know it will get hot? Velther asked in their combined voice. The planet has a short day cycle, and we're close to the sun. The temperature swings are extreme, but predictable. Over the next hour, Jake taught them to read the environment. The strange plants had thick, waxy leaves that stored water. The rock formations created natural windbreaks. The soil patterns showed where water flowed during storms. We need shelter, Jake said, but not just any shelter. We need something that works for hot and cold. Should we stay near the shuttle? Grixon asked. No, the shuttle is metal. It'll be like an oven when it gets hot and a freezer when it gets cold. We need to find or build something better. Jake led them to a rock formation about half a mile from the shuttle. See this? It's like a natural cave system. The rocks will keep us cool during the day and warm at night. And see these plants growing around it? That means there's water nearby. How can you tell? Zephic asked. Plants need water. They don't grow randomly. If there are plants here, there's water here. It took them 2 hours to find the water source, a small spring that bubbled up from between the rocks. The water was clear and smelled clean. Is it safe to drink? Kevtar asked. We'll test it carefully, Jake said. But first, let's set up our shelter. Jake showed them how to arrange rocks to create windbreaks and how to use the natural cave as a base. They gathered the waxy plants and used them to create insulation. UNL, being made of water herself, could tell which areas would stay coolest during the day. This is actually comfortable, Nixara said, floating around their improved shelter. It's going to get better, Jake promised. Now we need to think about food. We have rations, Velther said. For 30 days? With 7 of us? No, Grixon calculated. We have enough for perhaps 15 days. Then we need to find more food. What did you notice about the plants around the water source? They were different, Zephic said. Softer. Exactly. Plants that grow near water are usually safer to eat. They don't need to develop as many toxins to protect themselves. Jake showed them how to test plants safely. They found several that were edible, though not particularly tasty. More importantly, they found signs of small animals. Tracks, Jake said, pointing to marks in the sandy soil. Small, probably not dangerous. They come to the water source at night. You want to hunt them? Kevtar asked nervously. Not hunt, trap. Much safer and more efficient. That night, as the temperature dropped, they huddled in their shelter. Jake had shown them how to build a small fire using rocks and dried plant material. The fire kept them warm and gave them light. Jake, UNL said, I have been thinking. On my world, we have technology that controls our environment. Here, we are working with the environment instead. That's right. Sometimes you can't control your environment, so you have to adapt to it. But we are doing more than adapting. Velther observed. We are improving our situation. How so? This shelter is more comfortable than our original landing site. We have found food and water. We are not just surviving, we are thriving. Over the following days, they established a routine. They improved their shelter, found more food sources, and learned to predict the weather patterns. When a major storm hit on day 8, they were ready for it. Standard protocol would be to take shelter and wait, Jake said as they watched the storm from their protected cave. But look at what the storm is bringing us. The rain was filling natural basins in the rocks, giving them a large water supply. The wind was blowing down fruit from tall plants they couldn't normally reach. The lightning was showing them landmarks they could use for navigation. You see opportunities even in storms, Grixon observed. especially in storms. Big changes in the environment mean new opportunities. By day 15, they had established a thriving camp. They had reliable food and water sources, comfortable shelter, and a good understanding of the local environment. Jake was teaching them to make tools from local materials. "Jake," Nixara said, "I need to tell you something. Before I came here, I was afraid of everything. On my world, we avoid all risks." "That's not wrong," Jake said. "Being careful is smart. But being too careful means missing opportunities. I have learned more in 2 weeks here than in years of classes." "What have you learned?" "That fear and caution are different things. Fear stops you from acting. Caution helps you act safely." On day 20, they had an unexpected challenge. A group of large, aggressive animals appeared near their camp. They looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with sharp teeth and claws. "Standard protocol," Kevtar said nervously, "would be to retreat to the shuttle and call for emergency extraction." "That's one option," Jake said. "But let's think about this. Why are they here?" "To attack us," Zephic suggested. "Maybe, or maybe. They're here for the same reason we are: water and food." Jake studied the animals carefully. "Look at their behavior. They're not acting aggressive toward us. They're acting territorial about the water source. So what do? We share the space. We just need to be smart about it." Jake showed them how to create barriers that would keep the animals away from their shelter while still allowing them access to the water. They adjusted their daily routine to avoid the animals during their most active periods. "You turned a threat into a management problem," Velther observed. "Most threats are really just problems that need solutions." On day 25, they faced their biggest challenge yet. A massive storm system approached, much larger than anything they had seen before. "This could destroy our shelter," Grixon calculated. "Then we build a better one," Jake said. "In 5 days? We don't need to build from scratch. We need to adapt what we have." Jake led them in reinforcing their shelter and creating backup shelters in case the first one failed. They moved their food supplies to higher ground and created drainage channels to direct water away from their living area. "We are not just surviving this storm," UNL realized. "We are using it to improve our situation." "How?" "The drainage channels will give us fresh water even after the storm passes. The reinforced shelter will be stronger for." The return to the Galactic Survival Institute was unlike anything Jake had experienced. News of their success had spread throughout the station. Students and faculty lined the corridors to see the team that had not only survived Survey Planet 7 Alpha, but had thrived there. "Look at them," whispered a student as Jake's team walked past. "They look healthier than when they left." It was true. Kevtar stood straighter and moved with more confidence. UNL's water form seemed clearer and more focused. Even Nixara, who had been afraid of everything, floated with a new sense of purpose. Director Vox Ron was waiting in the main conference room with the entire board. The metal being's surface reflected the lights as he gestured for them to sit. "The preliminary reports are unexpected," he began. "Survey teams that visited your campsite found not just survival evidence, but actual improvements to the environment. We worked with what the planet gave us," Jake said simply. "That's what we need to understand," said Director Helen Foster, a crystalline being similar to Dr. Zilthara. "Your methods challenge everything we know about survival science." Dr. Mel Voren, the reptilian scientist, activated a holographic display showing footage from their planet's stay. Traditional survival doctrine teaches 3 principles: avoid danger, use technology for protection, and retreat when overwhelmed. Your team did none of these things. "We did all of those things," Jake corrected. "We just did them differently." "How so?" We avoided unnecessary dangers by understanding the environment. We used technology, just not high-tech tools. And we retreated when we needed to, but we didn't retreat from the whole situation. Can you explain the difference? Asked Professor Silanova, a being whose thoughts seemed to create visible light patterns around her head. Traditional retreat means going away from the problem. Strategic retreat means moving to a better position to deal with the problem. Dr. Zilthara leaned forward. Show them the storm example, Jake. Jake stood and walked to the display. On Bay 25, we faced a massive storm. Traditional protocol would have been to take shelter and hope it passed without killing us. That is correct, Director Voxron confirmed. Instead, we prepared for the storm while also preparing to use the storm. We built stronger shelters, but we also built water collection systems. We protected our food supplies, but we also positioned ourselves to gather new foods the storm would bring. You used the storm as a resource, Director Foster observed. Everything can be a resource if you look at it right. The board members exchanged glances. Some looked impressed. Others looked worried. Jake, Director Voxron said, there's something else we need to discuss. Your team members have been changed by this experience. Changed how? Kevtar stepped forward. Director, if I may speak? Go ahead, Kevtar. Before this mission, I was afraid of everything. My species comes from a world where we hide underground from any threat. We have lived this way for thousands of years. The insect being's voice grew stronger. But Jake taught us that fear and caution are different things. Fear stops you from learning. Caution helps you learn safely. And now? Director Voxran asked. Now I see problems as puzzles to solve, not threats to avoid. When I returned to my regular classes, I found myself asking different questions. Instead of, how do we avoid this danger? I ask, how do we understand this danger so we can deal with it? UNL moved forward, her water form rippling with emotion. The changes are not just mental, they are physical too. I can maintain my form in conditions that would have been impossible before. The stress of the planet made me stronger. This is what concerns us, Director Foster admitted. We sent students to learn survival techniques. They returned with entirely different ways of thinking. Is that bad? Jake asked. It depends on your perspective, said Dr. Melvorin. From a scientific standpoint, it's fascinating. From a social standpoint, it's potentially disruptive. What do you mean? Professor Silanova's thought lights flickered rapidly. Several governments have contacted us with concerns. They worry that citizens who learn Deathworld thinking might become difficult to manage. Difficult how? People who see problems as opportunities are less likely to accept that problems cannot be solved. Director Voxron explained. They become more independent, more willing to take risks, more likely to question authority. Jake was quiet for a moment. Are you saying that teaching people to survive better is dangerous because it makes them think for themselves? That's exactly what they're saying, Captain Steve Parker said as he entered the room. Sorry I'm late. I was dealing with messages from 3 different planetary governments. What did they want? Jake asked. They want to know if we can teach Deathworld methods to their military forces while somehow not teaching them to their civilian populations. That's impossible, Jake said. You can't teach someone to think adaptively about some things, but not others. We know that, Dr. Zilthara said. But they don't understand. Director Voxron stood up. This brings us to our decision. The board has reviewed your mission results and debated for 3 days. We have decided to create a new program. What kind of program? We're calling it Adaptive Survival Methodology. It will combine traditional safety protocols with Deathworld techniques. But it will be optional. and students will be warned about the psychological changes. Psychological changes? Dr. Mel Voren activated another display. We've been studying your team members since their return. Brain scans show increased activity in areas associated with problem-solving and risk assessment. They also show decreased activity in areas associated with fear and anxiety. That sounds like a good thing, Jake said. It is, from a survival standpoint. But it also means they'll never think the same way again. Velther spoke up in their combined voice. We do not want to think the same way again. The old way was limiting. The old way was safe, Director Foster pointed out. Safe from what? Nixara asked. Safe from learning? Safe from growing? Safe from becoming better than we were? Safe from change, Professor Silanova said quietly. Many species prefer stability to growth. But that's not how the universe works, Jake said. The universe is always changing. If you don't adapt, you get left behind. That's very Deathworld thinking, Dr. Zilthara observed. It's very logical thinking, Jake corrected. Just because it comes from a Deathworld doesn't make it wrong. Director Vox Ron made a decision. Jake, we're offering you a position as instructor in the new program. You'll teach alongside our traditional faculty, but you'll focus on adaptive methods. I accept, Jake said without hesitation. There's more, Captain Parker added. The Colonial Defense Force wants to send more humans to train here. They want to see if human methods can be taught to other species more systematically. And several independent colonies have requested human survival consultants, Dr. Mel Voren added. Word is spreading that Deathworld techniques work. But there's resistance too, Director Foster warned. The Galactic Safety Council is considering regulations on what they call high-risk survival training. They want to ban it? Jake asked. They want to control it. They're worried about the social implications. What social implications? Populations that learn to see problems as opportunities tend to become more innovative, more independent, and more likely to challenge existing systems, Professor Silanova explained. This can lead to rapid social change. And rapid social change can be destabilizing, Director Voxron added. Jake looked around the room at his team members. Are any of you sorry you learned to think differently? No, they all said at once. Do any of you feel like you've lost something important? Only our limitations, Kevtar said. Then what are we really talking about here? Jake asked the Borg. Are we talking about survival techniques? Or are we talking about whether people should be allowed to reach their full potential? The room was quiet for a long moment. You're right, Dr. Zilthara said finally. We're talking about much more than survival. We're talking about evolution, Dr. Melvorin added. Not biological evolution, but cultural and intellectual evolution. And that scares some people, Captain Parker said. It should, Jake said. Change is always scary. But you know what's scarier? Not changing when you need to. Director Voxron's metal surface seemed to shimmer as he made a decision. Jake, I'm going to be direct with you. Some members of the Galactic Council want to shut down this program before it starts. Why? Because they've seen what happened to your team. They've seen students who were compliant and predictable become independent and innovative. They worry about what happens when that spreads. What do you think should happen? I think, Director Voxron said slowly, that we should give individuals the choice. We should offer the training to those who want it, with full disclosure about the changes it will bring. And if the Council disagrees, then we'll have to decide whether we're educators or controllers. Jake stood up. Director, I have a question. For you, what's the real purpose of survival training? To keep people alive in dangerous situations. And what's the real purpose of education? To help people reach their potential. Then there's no conflict. Teaching people to survive better and helping them reach their potential are the same thing. Director Foster's crystalline form pulsed. With light. Jake, you've just defined the fundamental philosophy of the new program. What Philo? 6 months later, Jake stood in front of the largest classroom at the Galactic Survival Institute. Before him sat 37 students from 12 different species. It was the first official class of the new Adaptive Survival Methodology program. Welcome to Environmental Opportunity Assessment, Jake said. This class will teach you to see possibilities where others see problems. A student that looked like a walking tree raised a branch. Instructor Morrison, are the stories true? Did you really survive on Survey Planet 7 Alpha by making friends with dangerous animals? We didn't make friends with them, Jake corrected. We learned to share space with them safely. There's a difference. What difference? Asked a crystalline being similar to Dr. Zilfara. Friends implies emotional attachment. Sharing space safely is about understanding behavior patterns and finding mutually beneficial arrangements. Jake activated the holographic display. Let's start with a basic principle. Every environment contains resources, challenges, and opportunities. Traditional training focuses on avoiding challenges. We're going to learn to identify and use opportunities. Even in dangerous environments, asked a floating gas being, especially in dangerous environments. Dangerous places often have the most opportunities because fewer people go there. Jake changed the display to show a volcanic landscape. What? Do you see? Lava, said several students at once. Heat, added another. Toxic gases, said a third. All correct, Jake said. Now let's look deeper. What opportunities do you see? The students were quiet for a moment. Then a small mechanical being clicked and whirred. The heat could be used for power generation. Excellent. What else? The volcanic soil is very fertile, said another student. Good for growing food. The gases might be valuable for industrial processes, added a third. Perfect. You're learning to see the whole picture, not just the dangers. Professor Amy Chun, the new human instructor, entered the classroom. Sorry. I'm late. How are they doing? They're learning, Jake said. Amy, can you tell them about the colony project? Amy activated a second display. 3 months ago, the Kepler 442 colony was facing abandonment. The planet has extreme weather, limited resources, and hostile wildlife. Standard colonization methods weren't working. What changed? Asked a student. They requested human survival consultants. We sent a team trained in adaptive methods. Instead of fighting the environment, they learned to work with it. The display showed before and after images of the colony. The before image showed a struggling settlement huddled behind protective barriers. The after image showed a thriving community integrated with the natural environment. The weather patterns that were destroying their crops became part of their power generation system, Amy explained. The hostile wildlife became a source of food and materials. The limited resources became the foundation for a unique manufacturing process. They turned every problem into a solution. Jake added, Is this happening elsewhere? Asked a student. Everywhere, Amy said. 17 colonies have requested adaptive training. 5 planetary governments have asked for environmental assessment teams. The Galactic Mining Consortium wants to train their crews in opportunity identification. But there's resistance, too. Jake added honestly. Some species and governments are concerned about the social changes. What social changes? Asked the tree-like student. When people learn to see problems as opportunities, they start asking different questions. Instead of, why can't this be done? They ask, how can this be done? Instead of accepting limitations, they look for ways around them. That sounds positive, said a crystalline student. It is positive, Amy agreed, but it's also disruptive. People who think this way are less likely to accept that things can't be changed, which is why some governments don't like it. Jake said. Dr. Zilthara entered the classroom with a group of observers. Jake, Amy, I have some visitors who want to see the new program. The observers included beings Jake had never seen before. Tall, elegant creatures with silver skin and multiple eyes. These are representatives from the Alterian Collective, Dr. Zilthara explained. They're considering adopting adaptive methods for their deep space exploration program. One of the Alterians stepped forward. We have studied your methods with interest. Our traditional approaches have limited our expansion into hostile environments. We wish to learn. Of course, Jake said. Would you like to participate in today's exercise? That would be acceptable. Jake reset the holographic display. We're going to look at a real scenario. This is Survey Planet 12 Gamma. It's been classified as uninhabitable due to extreme conditions. Your assignment is to identify opportunities for survival and possibly settlement. The display showed a world covered in ice, with constant blizzards and temperatures far below freezing. The atmosphere was thin and contained little oxygen. This is clearly impossible, said one of the regular students. Nothing could survive there. Let's test that assumption, Jake said. What resources do you see? Ice, said the mechanical student. Lots of ice. Which means water, Amy added. What else? The blizzards are constant, observed in Alterian. That suggests strong, predictable wind patterns. Excellent. What could you do with strong, predictable winds? Generate power, said several students. The ice formations are massive, added another student. They could be carved into shelter. Structures. The thin atmosphere means less weather variation, noted a crystalline student. More predictable conditions. Jake smiled. Now you're thinking adaptively. In 30 minutes, you've found water, power, shelter materials, and predictable conditions. What seemed impossible is starting to look manageable. But what about food? Asked the tree-like student. Good question, Amy. Amy changed the display to show microscopic life forms. The ice contains microorganisms. They could be cultivated. FOR food or used to process other materials. And the constant storms bring material from other parts of the planet, Jake added. Minerals, organic compounds, even metal deposits. The Alterian representative made a sound of surprise. You have identified more opportunities in this environment than our survey teams found in months of study. That's because you're looking for opportunities, not just cataloging problems. Jake explained. Dr. Zilthara spoke up. Jake, tell them about the psychology component. Right. The biggest change in adaptive training isn't learning techniques. It's learning to think differently about challenges. How so? Asked an Alterian. Traditional thinking sees a problem and asks, how do we avoid this? Adaptive thinking sees a problem and asks, how do we use this? But surely some problems cannot be used, said a student. Maybe not directly, Jake admitted. But even problems that can't be solved can teach you something valuable, such as failure teaches you what doesn't work, which is just as valuable as knowing what does work. Pain teaches you about your limits, which helps you plan better. Fear teaches you about real dangers, which helps you take appropriate precautions. One of the Alterians stepped forward. This is fascinating. But we have a concern. Will learning these methods change our people in ways we cannot predict? Yes, Jake said honestly. It will change them. They'll become more independent, more innovative, more willing to take calculated risks. Is that a problem? It could be, the Alterian admitted. Our society values conformity and stability. Then adaptive training might not be right for your people, Amy said. This program requires a willingness to change. But without change, you'll be limited to the environments you can already handle, Jake pointed out. The galaxy is full of worlds that seem impossible, but are actually just challenging. Dr. Zilthara activated a new display showing a star map. These are the worlds that have become habitable since we started teaching adaptive methods. 17 formerly impossible colonies are now thriving. And these, Amy added, highlighting different systems, are the exploration missions that have succeeded using adaptive techniques. They've discovered resources and opportunities that traditional methods missed. The methods work, Jake said. The question is whether you want the results. The Alterian representative was quiet for a long moment. What would you recommend? Start small, Jake suggested. Send volunteers who want to learn. See how they adapt, then decide if you want to expand the program. That seems reasonable. That's what most species are doing, Dr. Zilthara said. The program is growing, but it's growing organically. People choose to learn because they see the benefits. And what about the resistance? Asked a student. It's still there, Jake admitted. Some governments are trying to ban adaptive training. Others are trying to control it. But the results speak for themselves. People want to learn, Amy added. When they see colonies thriving in impossible environments and expeditions succeeding where others failed, they want to know how. The galaxy is changing, Dr. Zilthara observed. Not just politically or technologically, but psychologically. People are starting to believe that problems can be solved. And that's changing everything, Jake said. When people believe problems can be solved, they start solving them. As the class ended, Jake looked around at his students. They came from 12 different species, but they were all learning to think in similar ways. They were learning to see opportunities where others saw obstacles, to find resources where others saw limitations, to adapt and thrive.